Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. Today, we are tackling a book that doesn't just offer advice. It offers a timeless and revolutionary framework for navigating the very fabric of life's challenges. We're diving into The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, a modern Bible for entrepreneurs, athletes, artists, and anyone who has ever felt stuck, overwhelmed, or defeated by the problems they face. Published in 2014, this book single-handedly reintroduced the ancient philosophy of Stoicism to a new generation. Its central premise, inspired by the Roman emperor and philosopher Marcus Aurelius, is deceptively simple yet profoundly transformative. The things that block our path, the obstacles, the frustrations, the failures, are not there to stop us. They are the path. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Holiday masterfully distills thousands of years of Stoic wisdom into a practical, actionable guide, drawing on incredible stories of historical figures who embodied this philosophy, from John D. Rockefeller and Amelia Earhart to Ulysses S. Grant. He argues that success is not about avoiding problems, but about developing the skill to see them clearly, act upon them correctly, and endure them with an unbreakable will. This book is a call to action, a reminder that we don't control what happens to us, but we always control how we respond. So, if you're ready to learn how to turn your biggest struggles into your greatest strengths, stay with us as we unpack the 3 critical disciplines that can transform any obstacle into an opportunity. Our journey begins with the most fundamental discipline, the one that governs everything that follows: perception. Ryan Holiday argues that before we can act, before we can endure, we must first learn to see. Our perception is the lens through which we interpret the world. A situation is not inherently good or bad. It is our judgment, our perception, that makes it so. When faced with an obstacle, a difficult boss, a financial crisis, a sudden illness, our initial emotional reaction is often the greatest part of the problem. We panic, we get angry, we despair. These unchecked emotions cloud our judgment and prevent us from seeing the situation for what it truly is: a set of objective facts. The Stoics taught that the first step to wisdom is to strip away these subjective impressions and see things with calm, dispassionate clarity. Holiday illustrates this with the story of John D. Rockefeller during the Great Panic of 1857. As a young man just starting in business, he watched as the entire economy collapsed around him. His competitors were panicking, making rash decisions, and being consumed by fear. Rockefeller, however, remained calm. He saw the chaos not as the end of the world, but as a unique opportunity. He studied the panic as if it were a science experiment, learning invaluable lessons about risk, credit, and human psychology. While others saw a terrifying crisis, his perception allowed him to see a once-in-a-lifetime education. This period of turmoil became the foundation upon which he would later build his empire Standard Oil. His ability to control his perception, to remain objective in the face of chaos, gave him an extraordinary advantage. This is the power we all have. We cannot control the external events, but we can control the story we tell ourselves about them. Is this a disaster, or is this an opportunity to learn? Is this a setback, or is it a chance to pivot in a new direction? The obstacle is the same, the perception is a choice. This choice is the first and most critical step in turning the obstacle upside down. To cultivate this power of perception, we must practice objectivity. This means seeing the thing and only the thing, without adding the drama of our emotions. When someone insults you, the objective fact is that they uttered a series of words. The feeling of being hurt is an interpretation you have added. When you lose a major client, the objective fact is that a contract has ended. The feeling of failure is a story you are telling yourself. The key is to break down the obstacle into its smallest, most objective parts. By deconstructing the problem, we remove its power to intimidate us. It ceases to be a monolithic monster and becomes a series of smaller, manageable issues. We must also learn to alter our perspective. Sometimes, we are too close to a problem to see it clearly. We must learn to step back to see the bigger picture. From a different angle, what looks like a dead end might reveal itself to be a turning point. As Holiday emphasizes, perspective is everything. Two people can look at the exact same situation and see completely different things. One sees a threat, the other an opportunity. One sees a prison, the other a training ground. The legendary Stoic philosopher, Seneca, was exiled to the island of Corsica, a fate that would break most men. Yet he chose to see it not as a punishment, but as a chance to study, to write, and to reflect. He used his obstacle as a catalyst for some of his most profound philosophical work. This is the discipline of perception in action, actively choosing to see the good in a situation, to find the advantage concealed within the disadvantage. It is not about pretending that bad things aren't happening. It is about recognizing that even within the worst of events, there is a space for us to choose our response, and that choice begins with how we perceive what is in front of us. Once we have mastered our perception and can see the obstacle with clarity and objectivity, we must move to the second discipline, action. This is where the theoretical becomes practical. It is not enough to simply see the opportunity within the obstacle. We must act upon it. Ryan Holiday emphasizes that action must be direct, creative, and bold. The Stoics were not passive philosophers who sat around contemplating their navels. They were men of action. They believed that we have a duty to engage with the world, to contribute, and to solve problems. When faced with an obstacle, the temptation is often to wait, to deliberate, to become paralyzed by analysis. Holiday argues that this is a trap. We must begin. We must take that first step, however small. The key is to focus on the process, not the outcome. We must break the problem down into small, manageable chunks, and then attack each one with relentless energy and focus. This is about iterating, adapting, and constantly moving forward. The great aviator Amelia Earhart embodied this spirit of persistent action. When she decided to become the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, she faced innumerable obstacles. The technology was unreliable, the weather was unpredictable, and the sheer danger of the undertaking was immense. But she did not let these obstacles deter her. She broke the problem down. She focused on one thing at a time, securing funding, modifying the plane, studying the weather patterns, planning the route. Each problem was met with a practical, deliberate action. When she was finally in the air, a series of mechanical failures threatened to doom her flight. Her fuel lines were leaking, and her altimeter failed. Instead of panicking, she took direct action. She assessed the situation, made the necessary adjustments, and kept flying. She was constantly in motion, responding to the challenges as they arose, never allowing herself to be overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. Her success was a testament to the power of breaking things down and taking one step, one action, at a time. This disciplined action requires a specific mindset. We must be willing to experiment, to fail, and to learn. We cannot be afraid of making mistakes. As Holiday puts it, we must practice the art of acquiescence, which means accepting the things we cannot change and focusing our energy exclusively on the things we can. There is no point in wasting our energy railing against the storm. Our job is to steer the ship. This is a pragmatic and deeply empowering philosophy. It frees us from the burden of things outside our control and allows us to pour all of our effort into the present moment, into the task at hand. This is the essence of what Holiday calls the process. Successful people, he argues, are not attached to grand outcomes. They are in love with the process. They focus on the daily habits, the small improvements, the relentless execution of the fundamentals. The great football coach Nick Saban is a modern example of this. He teaches his players to ignore the scoreboard, to ignore the championship game, and to focus only on executing the current play to the best of their ability. He knows that if they execute the process perfectly, the outcome will take care of itself. This is a powerful antidote to the anxiety and pressure that can come with chasing big goals. By focusing on the process, we stay grounded in the present. We are not distracted by fantasies of future success or haunted by past failures. We are simply here, now, doing the work. This is the kind of action that turns obstacles into opportunities. It is not about one single heroic gesture. It is about the cumulative effect of thousands of small, disciplined, and well-executed actions. It is about being persistent, creative, and always moving forward, no matter what stands in the way. As we delve deeper into the discipline of action, Ryan Holiday introduces a powerful concept that often runs counter to our modern instincts: the idea of doing our job and doing it right. In the face of a crisis or a major obstacle, our ego often tempts us to perform. We want to be the hero, to make a grand speech, to be seen as the one in charge. Holiday argues that this is a distraction. The most effective response to a crisis is often the most humble: to simply do your job. Focus on your specific responsibilities, and execute them flawlessly. This requires a certain kind of humility and a deep sense of duty. He tells the story of Ulysses S. Grant during the American Civil War. Grant was not a brilliant military strategist in the traditional sense. He was not flashy or charismatic. But he had an unwavering commitment to action and a relentless focus on his job. While other generals were posturing, debating strategy, and blaming others for their failures, Grant was simply moving forward. He was constantly on the offensive, relentlessly pressuring the enemy. His philosophy was simple. The only way to win the war was to fight. He was not distracted by politics, by public opinion, or by his own ego. He had a job to do, and he did it. This unwavering focus on his specific role is what ultimately allowed him to succeed where so many others had failed. This principle applies to any field. When a company is facing a financial crisis, the best thing the marketing team can do is to focus on generating leads. The best thing the engineering team can do is to improve the product. The best thing the CEO can do is to provide clear direction and remove obstacles for their team. It is not about one person saving the day. It is about every person doing their part. This approach requires us to embrace what Holiday calls pragmatism. We must be willing to do what works, not what looks good or what fits our preconceived notions. Sometimes the most effective action is not the most glamorous. It might be the difficult conversation we have been avoiding. It might be the boring, repetitive task that we have been putting off. It might be admitting that we were wrong and changing course. The obstacle is not a time for ideology. It is a time for results. We must be like water, flowing around the obstacles in our path, taking the path of least resistance when necessary, but always moving forward. This requires flexibility and a willingness to let go of our ego's attachment to being right. Furthermore, action must be understood as a marathon, not a sprint. The temptation is to throw all of our energy at a problem in one massive burst. But most significant obstacles are not overcome in a single day. They require sustained effort over a long period of time. This is where persistence and endurance become critical. We must be willing to get up every day and chip away at the obstacle, even when we are not seeing immediate results. The ancient Greek orator Demosthenes is a powerful example of this. He was born with a speech impediment and a weak voice. His dream of becoming a great public speaker seemed impossible. But he did not give up. He took relentless action. He practiced speaking with pebbles in his mouth to improve his enunciation. He recited speeches while running up hills to strengthen his lungs. He declaimed by the seashore to train his voice to be heard over the roar of the waves. It was a long, grueling, and often humiliating process. But through persistent, daily action, he transformed his greatest weakness into his greatest strength, becoming one of the most celebrated orators in history. His story is a powerful reminder that with the right kind of action, even the most formidable obstacles can be overcome. Having explored the disciplines of perception and action, we arrive at the third and final pillar of the Stoic framework, the will. This is perhaps the most internal and most profound of the three disciplines. The will is our inner fortress, the one thing that no one can ever take away from us. Ryan Holiday defines the will as our ability to endure, to persevere, and to find meaning in our suffering. There will be times when our perception is clear and our actions are bold, but we still fail. There will be obstacles that we simply cannot move. There will be situations that are completely outside of our control. This is where the will comes in. It is the understanding that while we may not be able to change our external circumstances, we can always choose our internal response. We can choose to be resilient. We can choose to maintain our character. We can choose to find a way to learn and grow from the experience, no matter how painful. The will is what allows us to not only survive adversity, but to be strengthened by it. The story of James Stockdale, a U.S. Navy pilot who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for over 7 years, is a harrowing and inspiring example of the power of the will. He was subjected to unimaginable torture, isolation, and deprivation. He had no control over his external circumstances, but he never relinquished control of his inner world. He used his knowledge of Stoic philosophy to endure. He accepted the brutality of his reality without ever losing hope. He understood that his captors could break his body, but they could never break his will. He found meaning in his suffering by taking on the role of a leader, creating a code of conduct for his fellow prisoners and helping them to survive. He turned the worst experience of his life into a crucible that forged his character and his leadership. This inner strength is not something we are born with. It is something we must cultivate. The Stoics had a practice for this called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This is the practice of regularly imagining the worst-case scenarios in our lives. What if we lost our job? What if we got sick? What if we lost a loved one? This is not about being pessimistic. It is about building psychological resilience. By contemplating these difficult scenarios in advance, we rob them of their power to shock and overwhelm us. We can prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally, and we can develop contingency plans. It is like a fire drill for the soul. When the real crisis comes, we are not caught off guard. We have already thought through it, and we are ready to respond with courage and composure. The will is also about learning to accept what is. The Stoics called this the art of acquiescence. It is the understanding that some things are simply outside of our control, and railing against them is a waste of our precious energy. This does not mean that we should be passive or fatalistic. It means that we should distinguish between what we can change and what we cannot, and then focus all of our efforts on the former. This is the essence of the famous Serenity Prayer. It is a formula for inner peace and effectiveness. The will is what allows us to find peace even in the midst of chaos. It is the knowledge that our ultimate good lies not in our external circumstances, but in our own character, in our own virtue. As long as we are acting with courage, with wisdom, with justice, and with moderation, then we are living a good life, regardless of the outcome. This is the unbreakable inner citadel that the will provides. Building on the foundation of the will, Ryan Holiday explores the concept of turning our obstacles into a kind of fuel. This goes beyond simple endurance. It is an active process of extracting value from our suffering. The will is not just about gritting our teeth and bearing the pain. It is about finding a way to use the pain to transform it into something positive. This is the essence of the Stoic concept of amor fati, or a love of fate. It is the practice of not only accepting but embracing everything that happens to us, both good and bad. It is seeing every event, no matter how tragic, as an opportunity to practice virtue, to become a better person. When faced with a devastating setback, the will allows us to ask not, "Why did this happen to me?" but "What can I learn from this? How can I use this to become stronger?" This is a radical and deeply empowering perspective. It means that nothing is ever truly wasted. Every failure, every heartbreak, every injustice becomes a part of our education, a part of our training. The great German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who was deeply influenced by the Stoics, captured this idea perfectly when he wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." The will is what provides us with that why. It is our connection to a purpose that is larger than our own personal comfort or happiness. When we are driven by a sense of purpose, our own personal suffering becomes less significant. We are able to endure incredible hardship because we know that we are serving a cause that is greater than ourselves. The abolitionist Thomas Wentworth Higginson, a commander of the 1st Black Regiment in the Civil War, faced constant racism, insubordination, and the threat of death. But he was driven by a powerful why, the cause of freedom and equality. This purpose gave him the strength to endure, to lead, and to inspire his men in the face of impossible odds. This transformation of suffering into strength also requires a deep sense of humility. The ego tells us that we do not deserve to suffer, that we are entitled to an easy life. The will, on the other hand, understands that suffering is an inevitable and even necessary part of the human experience. It is through our struggles that we develop compassion, that we cultivate wisdom, and that we forge our character. The ancient metaphor of the blacksmith is apt here. It is only by being heated in the fire and hammered on the anvil that a piece of iron can be transformed into a strong and beautiful sword. In the same way, it is only by facing and overcoming obstacles that we can become the best version of ourselves. This requires us to surrender our ego's desire for control. We must accept that we are not the masters of the universe, that there are forces at play that are far beyond our command. The will is about finding freedom within these constraints. It is about focusing on our own small part of the world and doing our best to act with virtue and integrity within that sphere. It is the understanding that true power lies not in controlling the world around us, but in mastering the world within us. This is the ultimate promise of the will, that no matter how difficult our circumstances, we always have the power to choose our response. We can choose to be broken, or we can choose to be made stronger. We can choose to see our obstacles as curses, or we can choose to see them as blessings in disguise. This choice, and this choice alone, is the key to a life of resilience, meaning, and inner peace. Let's revisit the discipline of perception and explore it through a more strategic lens. Ryan Holiday emphasizes that controlling our perceptions is not about naive optimism or pretending that problems don't exist. It's about a disciplined and strategic realism. It's about seeing the obstacle not as a monolithic, terrifying entity, but as a collection of parts, some of which may be advantageous to us. The key is to find the handle, the leverage point, that allows us to begin to dismantle the problem. This requires us to manage our emotions with an iron will. Emotions like fear, anger, and anxiety are evolutionary responses designed to protect us, but in the modern world, they often do more harm than good. They are, as Holiday calls them, counterproductive. They cloud our judgment, lead to impulsive decisions, and drain our energy. The first act of a Stoic in the face of an obstacle is to steady their nerves. It is to take a deep breath and say, "I will not let my emotions control this situation. I will see it for what it is." This inner calm is a superpower. While everyone else is panicking, the person who can remain calm and objective has an enormous strategic advantage. They can see opportunities that others miss. They can think clearly and make rational decisions. This is why the military and emergency services place such a heavy emphasis on training under pressure. They are conditioning their personnel to control their emotional responses so that they can function effectively in a crisis. We must do the same for ourselves in our own lives. We must practice maintaining our composure in small, everyday frustrations so that we are prepared when the big obstacles come. This process of controlling perception also involves recognizing what is truly up to us. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously divided the world into two categories: things that are within our control and things that are not. Within our control are our own thoughts, our own judgments, our own actions. Outside of our control are virtually everything else: the weather, the economy, the actions of other people. The source of most of our stress and anxiety comes from trying to control the things that are outside of our control. The path to tranquility and effectiveness lies in focusing all of our energy on the things that are within our power. This is a simple but profound shift in perspective. It means that we no longer waste our time complaining about the traffic. We use that time to listen to a podcast or make a phone call. We no longer get angry about a colleague's incompetence. We focus on our own work and on finding a way to work around the problem. This is not about being passive. It is about being strategic. It is about conserving our energy for the battles that we can actually win. When we apply this to an obstacle, it means that we don't focus on the unfairness of the situation. We don't focus on what we wish were different. We focus on our response. What is the next right action I can take? What is the one thing I can do right now to make this situation better? This is how we find the handle. By letting go of what we can't control, we are free to act with precision and power on what we can. This is the strategic heart of perception, seeing clearly, managing our emotions, and focusing our energy where it will have the greatest impact. Let's dive deeper into the discipline of action by exploring the necessity of a bias toward it. In the face of an obstacle, our natural inclination is often to hesitate. We want more information. We want a perfect plan. We want to be certain of success before we begin. Ryan Holiday argues that this is a form of paralysis. The obstacle is not a puzzle to be solved in our minds. It is a reality to be engaged with in the world. The only way to find the solution is to start moving. We must be willing to take imperfect action, to make mistakes, and to learn as we go. As General George S. Patton famously said, "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week." This is the spirit of the Stoic approach to action. It is about embracing the chaos and uncertainty of the real world and having the courage to act anyway. This does not mean being reckless. It means being prepared to adapt. It means seeing every action as an experiment. We try something, we observe the result, we adjust our approach, and we try again. This iterative process is how all great progress is made. The founders of the tech startup Airbnb are a great example of this. When they first launched their idea of renting out air mattresses on their floor, they were met with a series of obstacles. No one was booking. They were on the verge of bankruptcy. Instead of giving up, they took action. They flew to New York, where most of their users were, and they went door to door, taking professional photos of their hosts' apartments. It was a small, imperfect action, but it worked. Bookings doubled. They didn't have a grand strategy. They just kept trying things until they found what worked. This is the power of a bias toward action. It is the understanding that clarity comes from engagement, not from contemplation. This relentless action must also be paired with a sense of creativity and opportunism. When one path is blocked, we must be willing to find another. We must be like the entrepreneur who, when faced with a market that doesn't want their product, doesn't try to force it on them, but instead pivots to create a new product that meets a real need. This is about seeing the obstacle not as a wall, but as a door. It is about asking, how can I use this to my advantage? The legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi was a master of this. In his famous duels, he would often use the terrain to his advantage. If the sun was in a certain position, he would use it to blind his opponent. If the ground was uneven, he would use it to disrupt his opponent's footing. He saw the environment not as a set of neutral conditions, but as a collection of tools that he could use to his advantage. He turned the obstacles of the battlefield into weapons. We must learn to do the same in our own lives. When a project is delayed, perhaps it's an opportunity to refine our plan. When we are criticized, perhaps it's an opportunity to learn about our weaknesses. When a door closes, perhaps it's an opportunity to look for the window that has just opened. This requires a flexible and opportunistic mindset. We cannot be rigid in our plans. We must be willing to flow like water, to adapt to the changing landscape, and to always be on the lookout for the unexpected advantage. This is the art of action, to be persistent, to be pragmatic, to be creative, and to never, ever stop moving forward. Let's explore the discipline of the will from a different angle, the role of perspective in building our inner fortress. Ryan Holiday emphasizes that our will is not just about raw endurance, It's about the context in which we place our struggles. The power of our will is directly proportional to the size of our perspective. When we are trapped in our own small, self-centered world, our problems can seem enormous and overwhelming. A minor inconvenience can feel like a major tragedy. But when we connect to something larger than ourselves, to history, to the cosmos, to the struggles of others, our own problems are put into their proper perspective. They shrink in size and significance. The Stoics were masters of this. They would regularly practice what is known as taking the view from above. They would imagine themselves floating above the city, then above the country, then above the entire planet, looking down on all the petty squabbles and anxieties of human life. From this cosmic perspective, their own personal problems seemed trivial. This is not about diminishing the reality of our pain. It is about contextualizing it. It is about reminding ourselves that we are a small part of a much larger story. This perspective can give us a profound sense of calm and resilience. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, in his personal journal, Meditations, constantly reminded himself of the vastness of time and space. He would reflect on the countless generations that had come before him and the countless generations that would come after. In the grand sweep of history, his own reign, his own struggles, were but a fleeting moment. This perspective did not make him passive, it made him humble, it made him focused, and it gave him the strength to bear the immense burdens of his office with grace and dignity. This broadening of perspective also involves connecting to the shared human experience of suffering. When we are going through a difficult time, it is easy to feel isolated, to believe that we are the only ones who have ever felt this way. The will is strengthened by the knowledge that we are not alone. For thousands of years, human beings have faced the same fundamental challenges: loss, failure, injustice, mortality. By reading history, by studying philosophy, by engaging with great works of art, we can connect to this long chain of human experience. We can learn from the wisdom of those who have come before us. We can draw strength from their stories of courage and resilience. This is why Holiday fills his book with so many historical examples. He is reminding us that we are part of a larger tribe, that the path we are walking has been walked by many before. This can be an incredible source of comfort and inspiration. It reminds us that our current obstacle is not unique or insurmountable. It is simply our turn to face the kind of challenges that are inherent to the human condition. The will, then, is not just a personal attribute, it is a collective one. It is a flame that is passed down from one generation to the next. By cultivating our own inner strength, we are not just helping ourselves, we are contributing to this collective human project of finding meaning and purpose in the face of adversity. This is the ultimate power of the will, to connect us to something larger than ourselves, and in doing so, to give us the strength to endure anything. Let's synthesize the three disciplines: perception, action, and will, and see how they work together as a cohesive system. Ryan Holiday presents them as a linear process, but in reality, they are a continuous feedback loop. Our perception informs our action tests our will, and the results of our action then feed back into our perception, starting the cycle anew. The true mastery of the Stoic art of living lies in integrating these three disciplines into a seamless whole. An obstacle appears. First, we use our perception to see it clearly and objectively to find the opportunity within it. We control our emotions and focus on what is within our power. Second, we take direct, creative, and persistent action. We break the problem down, we focus on the process, and we are willing to adapt and experiment. Third, we summon our will to endure the struggle, to find meaning in the hardship, and to accept the things we cannot change. Then, based on the outcome of our actions, we adjust our perception. Did our approach work? What did we learn? How has the obstacle changed? And the cycle begins again. This is a dynamic and iterative process. It is a way of life, not a one-time fix. The goal is not to eliminate obstacles. That is impossible. But to become so skilled at this process that we welcome obstacles as opportunities to practice our craft. Consider the story of the German Jewish philosopher and political theorist, Hannah Arendt. In the 1930s and 40s, she faced the ultimate obstacle, the rise of Nazism and the Holocaust. Her world was destroyed. She was arrested, she became a refugee, and she lost countless friends and family members. This was an obstacle of unimaginable proportions. But Arendt applied the Stoic framework, perhaps unconsciously, to not only survive, but to produce her most important work. First, she used her perception. She refused to be consumed by despair. Instead, she looked at the horror of totalitarianism with a clear, analytical eye. She saw it not just as a tragedy, but as a philosophical problem to be understood. Second, she took action. She worked to rescue Jewish children from France. She wrote, she lectured, she bore witness. Her actions were not grand or heroic in a military sense, but they were the actions that were available to her, and she pursued them with relentless energy. Third, she summoned her will. She endured the pain of exile and loss without losing her intellectual and moral compass. She transformed her personal suffering into a profound philosophical inquiry into the nature of evil, power, and humanity. Her great works, like The Origins of Totalitarianism, were forged in the fire of this obstacle. She is a perfect example of how the three disciplines work together. Her clear perception of the problem allowed her to take meaningful action, and her unbreakable will allowed her to endure the process and ultimately to create something of lasting value from her suffering. This is the promise of The Obstacle is the Way, that by integrating these three disciplines, we can turn even the most horrific of circumstances into a catalyst for growth, wisdom, and profound contribution. As we conclude our journey through The Obstacle is the Way, we must confront the ultimate purpose of this philosophy. It is not simply about achieving success in the conventional sense, more money, more fame, more power. It is about achieving a state of inner tranquility and freedom, what the Stoics called apatheia, a state of mind free from emotional disturbance, and eudaimonia, a state of flourishing and well-being. The ultimate goal is to build an inner citadel that is impervious to the chaos of the external world. It is to reach a point where our happiness and our sense of self-worth are not dependent on our external circumstances. This is the ultimate freedom. It is the freedom from fear, from anxiety, from the desperate need for the approval of others. This is a radical and counter-cultural idea. Our society teaches us that happiness comes from getting what we want. The Stoics teach us that happiness comes from wanting what we get. It comes from embracing our fate, from loving what is, and from finding meaning and purpose in the challenges that life throws our way. This is not a philosophy of resignation. It is a philosophy of empowerment. It is the understanding that the only thing that can truly harm us is our own judgment, our own undisciplined mind. Once we master our inner world, the outer world loses its power to control us. This is the final and most important lesson of the book. The obstacle is not just the way to achieve our external goals, it is the way to achieve inner peace. Every time we face an obstacle with courage, with wisdom, and with resilience, we are not just solving a problem, we are building our character. We are forging our soul. This is a lifelong practice. There is no graduation day from the school of Stoicism. It is a daily commitment to seeing clearly, acting rightly, and enduring with grace. It is about finding a sense of purpose that is so powerful that it can carry us through any storm. It is about understanding that the purpose of life is not to be happy, but to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. The obstacles are the opportunities to do just that. They are the tests that reveal our character and give us the chance to practice the virtues that make for a good life. So, the next time you are faced with a daunting obstacle, do not despair. Remember the words of Marcus Aurelius, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." See the obstacle not as a barrier, but as a gateway. See it as an invitation to practice the timeless art of turning adversity into advantage, suffering into strength, and your own personal struggles into a source of wisdom and resilience for yourself and for the world. This is the path of the Stoic. This is the way. And it is a path that is open to all of us, starting right here, right now, with the very next obstacle that stands in our way. In conclusion, The Obstacle is the Way is far more than a self-help book. It's a profound and practical guide to living a better life. Ryan Holiday has successfully taken the ancient wisdom of Stoicism and made it accessible and relevant for the 21st century. The book's true power lies in its simple, actionable framework of perception, action, and will. It provides a mental toolkit that can be applied to any problem, from the minor frustrations of daily life to the most devastating of personal tragedies. Its impact has been immense, embraced by NFL coaches, tech entrepreneurs, and political leaders, all of whom have found value in its timeless message of resilience and pragmatism. In a world that often encourages us to complain, to blame others, and to feel like victims, this book is a powerful antidote. It is a call to take ownership of our lives, to focus on what we can control, and to see every challenge not as a burden, but as an opportunity to become stronger, wiser, and more virtuous. It is a reminder that the path to a good life is not paved with ease and comfort, but with the very obstacles that we strive to overcome.